really mean that. Because a lot of folks are going to leave here angry tonight, and I'm going to give you some action steps, some things you can do to counter what I'm going to tell you about. But I'm going to talk about ISIS not over there in Syria and Iraq, in the Middle East. I'm going to talk about ISIS here in this country. And I'm going to talk about recent jihadi attacks here in this country that have been motivated and inspired by ISIS, not controlled by ISIS. They're independent actors. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the Muslim Brotherhood and how they're trying to subvert our Constitution here in this country. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about our culture and how it's being changed. How it's being changed drastically. And yes, we've got to take our country back. And we've got to do it before it's too late. And I'm afraid, unless we get people mobilized, it's going to be too late. So, as of June 26, there have been 53 Islamic-related suspects arrested in 2015. This is twice the number that have been arrested for ISIS or Islamic-related matters in the previous 2 years. And all of these individuals, all of these 10, have been arrested by the FBI for either attempting to join ISIS over there or attempting plots and attacks here in this country. And this individual was arrested on July 4th, Ali al-Mariki. He was arrested for bomb-making, weapons charges, and for plotting to attack a college, a dormitory, and cafeteria in Boston. Why was he arrested? Because he was turned in by his father, a Boston police officer, a captain of the Boston Police Department, turned in his own son for becoming radicalized to Islam. And we know who that fellow is. Mohammed Yosef Abdul Aziz killed 4 Marines and a Navy sailor in Chattanooga on July 16th. Maybe some of you heard about this information at Dobbins Air Force Base. A note left on a soldier's windshield. The good news is that that turned out to be a hoax committed by another National Guard member, if you can believe that. But this was not. Queensborough, New York, an Iraqi war veteran was targeted. Imagine serving your country and you come back here and someone writes that note. And then we have CNN. CNN commentator Tom Quintus, former FBI assistant director, right after the Chattanooga attack, when they were talking, wondering if it was a terrorist attack or not. My gosh, it was a terrorist attack. And Fuentes said, we don't even know if Muhammad's name is a Muslim name. Can you imagine that? What name do you think Muhammad belongs to? So part of the problem is, we've got leadership, former leadership, just like that. It refuses, out of political correctness or ignorance, to call a spade a spade. Well, we've had recent thwarted mass attacks. Fazlin Garbanzo plotted to detonate a bomb at Boise, Idaho Park on July 4th. Harlem Schwartz plotted to detonate nail bombs on Key West Beach and at South Beach in Florida, and he was previously cleared to work at Key West International Airport. Miguel Moran Diaz sentenced to 10 years for plotting to shoot spectators at a Miami sports stadium. Nader Sadat plotted to attack New York City landmarks and tourists with a pressure cooker bomb. And then just last week, Ahmed Karim Harari plotted to bomb 2 University of California campuses at Santa Cruz. So the threat is real and the threat is local. The threat is local. Now, one thing I want to say tonight, and I hope that if there aren't any media here, that we will take these down. The majority of Muslims, I think, in this country are peaceful. The majority of Muslims in this country, I believe, are peaceful. They are providing valuable information to law enforcement so these plots and attacks are intercepted. Now, as I go out and talk, everyone, when I make that statement, says, well, why don't they speak up? Why don't they say something? I've got two responses to that. Number one, why don't we say something? Because we're silent too. We know something's wrong. And number two, if they say something, they can be accused of apostasy. And apostasy under Sharia law is punishable by death. Punishable by death. So they're scared. They're afraid. And they have every right to be afraid for not speaking up. Well, we know what's going on. 1 year ago, the FBI published its threats to the homeland. Its domestic threats to the homeland. And guess what? Islam didn't make the list. Islamic jihadi fighters did not make the list. That's the list. That's the list of the threats to the homeland that the FBI put out. You talk about denial. You talk about deception. You talk about political correctness. There it is. On May 7th of this year, the new FBI director said there may be thousands of ISIS followers here being radicalized in the United States. Thousands. That's what he said. So we've gone from August of last year to no threat, to May of this year to thousands of ISIS followers representing a threat. And right after he made that statement, the Department of Defense increased their alert awareness to all military bases in the United States, elevated the threat level. And then ISIS themselves came out and said, we have 71 fighters from Syria already here in 15 states. And they identified the states in white in particular. They acknowledged that fighters are here. So why did everything change on May the 7th? Who can tell me what happened on May the 3rd? Garland, Texas is what happened. We had the Draw the Muhammad contest, didn't we? Pamela Geller sponsored it. In case you haven't seen the winning caricature, there he is. Now we've got public officials that said that, well, she went too far. She was deliberately provocative. Deliberately provocative. She should have known better. It was hate speech. Being disrespectful to a religion. And we know what happened on May the 3rd. This individual, along with his partner from Arizona, came to Garland, Texas with automatic weapons and were going to kill the people in attendance. Fortunately, we had a young traffic officer who took both of them down, killed them both in a shootout in a parking lot with 300 people in an auditorium like this. Can you imagine what those guys would have done had they gotten past the security? And yet that was her fault. Her fault. That she provoked the attack. And one of your presidential candidates echoed that. Trump. Donald Trump made that comment. What are the current threats to the homeland? We're going to talk a little bit about that. We've got ISIS sleeper cells already here. Already here. And they have formed an alliance with the narco-terrorists in northern Mexico. Warning bulletins have already been issued to law enforcement along the southern border. They were issued late last year. Late last year. 2 ISIS camps have been discovered close to the border. One 8 miles from El Paso, Texas, and the other camps located in communities of Columbus and Deming, New Mexico. Documents have been found at both of those camps indicating that ISIS is conducting surveillance activities along the southern border. They're targeting for Fort Bliss, White Sands Missile Range, electrical power stations, and universities in the southern part of our country. One scenario has that ISIS is going to use the tunnels that are used by the narco-terrorists along our southern border. This is the southwest portion. I think you know that this is where San Diego is, up here. There are literally hundreds of these tunnels across or underneath our southern border, and yes, we're going to put up a wall. We're going to make sure that we've got the area underneath the wall covered. These are very sophisticated tunnels. And ISIS is going to pay an awful lot of money to these narco-terrorists to use these tunnels. And you can imagine the number of fighters that can come across the southern border, pick up arms and ammunition here, already pre-stockpiled in abandoned warehouses where the tunnels will come up on our side, get in pickup trucks, and you can imagine the carnage that they will cause in a metropolitan area like El Paso or San Diego or wherever. That's the scenario. And there are others. Current threats. The commanding general of Fort Bliss, Texas, last year was issued a warning by a CIA officer saying that a truck bomb or vehicle-borne improvised explosive device attack was imminent. Fortunately, he got an advance warning and was able to secure his base. Texas Department of Public Safety put on notice to be alert for ISIS sympathizers crossing the border. And lastly, we know about the pipeline, the American terror pipeline for Syria, Somalia, from the twin cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. What you may not know is Minneapolis, St. Paul has the largest Somali population outside of Mogadishu. 100,000 to 150,000 refugees here. And we've got more scheduled for Clarkston, Georgia, coming here. So how are these ISIS supporters getting here from over there? Through South America, where Iran and Hezbollah have been active for years, through this triangle of Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. And then are migrating their way up to our southern border. We know they're here, or their sympathizers here, because of graffiti found in many of our U.S. cities. We've been put on notice. It's the first visible clue. They're marking their territory, they want to intimidate, and they're using graffiti as a recruitment tool. And they're trying to sell intimidation and fear. Our last one there is in Lubbock, Texas. Almost daily we hear about people making the trek from our country over there that have been radicalized. Hoda Mathuna from Alabama. She said, go on a drive-by and spill all their blood. Kill them. They're talking about us. She's a 20-year-old woman who left Hartsfield International Airport. There's her high school graduation picture in 2013. She left Hartsfield Jackson in November of last year. She married a jihadi fighter from Australia in December. She was widowed in January, and she's going to stay in Syria. She was radicalized at the University of Alabama following high school. Abdul Wakil Khalil, the first from Georgia, arrested for attempting to join ISIS. He's from Augusta. He recently was convicted and sentenced to 15 years. And this couple just last week in Mississippi, the girl on the left, radicalized to Islam, and was going to go to Syria with her husband, spend their honeymoon, and then minister to ISIS fighters providing medical assistance. She is the daughter of a Vicksburg police officer and Army veteran who spent 23 years in the military, serving in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and she was radicalized. So what's the allure? What's the big draw? What's the big draw? Well, since the last Islamic Caliphate was disbanded in 1924, they have dreamed of reestablishing the caliphate. The one world Islamic government under Sharia law, to impose Sharia law worldwide. So the draw is, it's the noble cause of Islam. And followers are told, take part in the noble cause. Join up while you can. Participate in the last battle, the final battle for mankind. So one way ISIS is so successful, and has been so much more successful than other terrorist groups, is social media. This man here, Abu Samara, comes from Boston, has dual citizenship. He's a graduate of the University of Massachusetts from Boston in computer science. He is the social media guru for ISIS. He has put together the recruitment plan for ISIS. Now the good news is he was assassinated by a drone attack just a few months ago. The bad news is his plan continues. It's a very sophisticated plan targeting young people. High school, middle school, both men and women. Much more sophisticated than Al-Qaeda ever used. Some of the images. Targeting young, impressionable people. Think back, folks, when you were late teens, early 20s, we were all trying to find ourselves, right? Figuring out what we're going to do in life. Well, these guys are trying to target that. Influence young people to join the cause. And some of them are influenced by the carnage. It indicates that ISIS is winning. ISIS is on the move. They're taking territory. They're intimidating. All for jihad, all for Islam. Join the ranks. Join the ranks. Take part in the adventure. Take part in the big adventure. And this man here comes from Florida, trying to show a kinder, gentler side of ISIS. He was a suicide bomber. He lost his life, but not before putting together several propaganda videos for ISIS, attempting to influence young people. And how about women? Why are they flocking to ISIS from the Western countries, from America, from Europe? The images, adventure, take part in the battle. Take part in the battle. And romance. There's a marriage office in Syria. All ISIS fighters have been promised a war bride. As soon as women get to Syria, they're immediately married off. Married off. So, for romance. And the image is targeted. Targeted. And of course, they're being trained for battle as well. This lady here from Scotland, Aqsa Mahmood. She's widely known. She's quite a following on social media. She commands an all-female brigade in Raqqa, Syria, the capital of ISIS. And their mission is to make sure that other women in Syria or in Raqqa anyway, are Sharia compliant, they're properly covered, properly dressed. Second mission is to recruit other females to ISIS and to run the local brothel for ISIS warriors. And then Waqas, a 20-year-old from Seattle, is a main ISIS recruiter for women here in this country. She has not been captured yet. And this woman, Heather Elizabeth Kaufman, was sentenced last year for enticing her boyfriend to join ISIS. And then Shannon Connolly from Denver, 19 years old, was intercepted before she could make the trip to ISIS. And there's her picture on the far right. And how about the children? The children, the next generation of child warriors. What they're training, young, impressionable children. Let's look at those spaces. And recently the FBI has started a program where it goes into high school warning young children, stay off the social media, these social media sites. Well, what have we been told? What have we been told about ISIS? It has absolutely nothing to do with Islam. Islam is a religion of peace, and ISIS has perverted it, has hijacked it. So let's take a look at the sources. Let's take a look at the sources for Islam. First, the Quran, then the recorded deeds and words of Muhammad, and finally, the Green Book, recognized Sharia law. It is recognized by both Sunni and Shia Muslims worldwide as being definitive Sharia or Islamic law. Now, who can tell me the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims? Yes, sir.
One is an exact follower of Muhammad, the other is a Muhammad descendants. There's the difference in there.
So what was the second one?
The Sunni,
Yes.
those are of the direct descendant of Muhammad, whereas the Shia, they tend to believe that in the, how to say it, the beliefs of Muhammad and it's in their leadership.
Anybody else? Well, you got it exactly backwards. When Muhammad died in 632, he left no instructions of how his successor would be selected. Shias, who constitute roughly 15% of all Muslims, believe it must be a blood relative. Sunnis believe that it must be the best qualified, and they represent 85% of Muslims worldwide. Now, they've been duking it out ever since. But one thing they're totally agreed upon, that the great Saint, us, must be taken out. That Sharia law must be established and be the dominant law worldwide. So let's take a look at these source materials and see if ISIS is following it. You may have heard back in January, February this year, Graham Wood, he was interviewed repeatedly on CNN, Fox News. He wrote a very probing article about Islam and ISIS in the Atlantic Monthly, which is a very progressive or liberal publication. And what did he say about all this? He said the reality is that Islamic State is Islamic. Hasn't hijacked anything. It's following Islam. In fact, they follow it very closely. Perhaps more closely than any other group. Any other group. Now, what do you base that on? Why could he make that statement? Well, there are 109 violent verses in the Quran that mandate that Muslims must kill non-believers. 109 verses. That doesn't sound very peaceful to me. Well, what are we told? Well, we're told we've got our violent verses in the Bible, too. Well, we do, in the Old Testament, right? We know that. I define anybody, show me one verse in the Bible where Christians are told to kill non-believers. You're not going to find that. I'll show you 109 verses in the Quran where Muslims are directed for all time to kill non-believers. And you can read the verses themselves. I'm not going to show you 109 verses tonight, but you can Google them. Just do a web search. They'll come up. How about beheading? Oklahoma. Remember that last year? It was reported, widely reported, that Alton Alexander Nolan, that was his Christian name before he converted to Islam in prison. He took the new name of Jakim Israel, but the media didn't tell us that. He beheaded a co-worker, a 55-year-old woman, because she refused to convert to Islam. He was just doing what he was told to do. We were told that was all workplace violence, but how about those four? They weren't killed in the workplace. They were beheaded in an orange jumpsuit. And how about the 21 Coptic Christians who were beheaded on the shore of the Mediterranean last year? 21 of them at one time. Christian males beheaded. Well, we were told again that it's not Islamic. Islam is a religion of peace. Remember that? We were told it's not Islamic. Well, what's in the Quran? You can read that verse just as well as I can. Surah 8. Surah means chapter 8, verse 12. Smite ye above their necks. Take off their heads. And in chapter 47, verse 4, strike off their heads. God, I'll ask you, is Islam following the playbook? Absolutely. Absolutely. Doing exactly what they're told to do. And if that's not enough, they should follow the words and deeds of Muhammad. What did he do? Well, he was a warrior too. He wasn't a preacher. He was a warrior. He led people in battle to conquer. He used violence. And one of the first battles he had was with a Jewish tribe. And when they surrendered, he had between 600 and 900 Jewish warriors beheaded in front of their families. So they have plenty of examples to follow. Plenty of examples to follow. This is not workplace violence. And how about the poor Jordanian pilot who's burned to death? What's the Quran say about that? Chapter 4, verse 56. Now I ask you, is this ISIS Islamic or not? So let's have a little brief review of the basics. I've been here before, but maybe you've forgotten this. The rest of you just have to endure it. Well, let's take a look. If you believe the story, it started all in a cave outside Mecca in 610 when Muhammad went out, fell asleep, and started to receive revelations through the angel Gabriel of the final word of Allah, God in Arabic. The final word from God was received starting in 610. And for the next 12 years while he was in Mecca, by the way, was a large city. It consisted of both Jewish and Jewish and Christian tribes, and a third group of tribes called pagans. They worshipped some 360 idols. Muhammad came back from the cave and he says, "Follow me. I've got a better way. I've got a better way for all of you. There's one God, Allah, and I am his messenger." Well, he was ridiculed for that, embarrassed for it. People didn't accept the message. But he practiced peacefulness. Turned the other cheek. He told his followers, we must be peaceful. And they were. And this is where Islam got all its peaceful verses, when he was in Mecca. And finally, in 622, things changed. Now, 622 is a very important year for Muslims. It represents the first year in the lunar calendar. Now, why is it 622 and not 610? 610 is when it all started. But what happened in 622 that was so important that became the first year of the lunar calendar? Well, that's when Mecca and his followers, all 130 of them, that's all he converted in 12 years, left Mecca for Medina. And that's when Islam changed. That's when it matured. That's when it took on its true color. And that's when the verses changed. The verses became violent. And Muhammad was told, go on a conquest. Islam must dominate. Islam must dominate. And so for the next 10 years, he went on the first jihad, and he conquered by force the Arabian Peninsula. Now, if you know anything about Islam, It's very clear, very direct, and there are no contradictions. Well, obviously there's a contradiction there, isn't there? Between the peaceful verses and the violent ones. What takes precedence? Well, they have a doctrine called abrogation. Those verses that were received later make null and void the verses received earlier. So the peaceful verses have been made null and void. And we're left with the violent ones, the violent verses. Now, our president has his own account of history. It was revealed to us during the last National Prayer Breakfast, where he said to Christians and Jews, don't get on your high horse, you've got some baggage yourselves in the Crusades. It was a very violent period, and yes, it was. It was very violent. What Mr. Obama was attempting to suggest was that the Crusades caused Islam to be violent. What the president left out, and he frequently does, and leaves out important facts, is what preceded the Crusades. What came first? The second jihad. That's what came first before the first crusade. Now remember, all this started here, in Mecca and Medina. Muhammad made sure that Arabian Peninsula fell to Muslims, conquered. And when he died in 632, what did his followers do? They picked up the sword and started the second jihad. And they went through the Middle East, from Egypt all the way up through Turkey. That's the Levant. All the way through Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, India, and then westward across northern Africa. It was primarily populated by peaceful Jewish and Christian tribes. They conquered those and went across the Straits of Gibraltar through Spain and into southern France. Conquest. That took about 300 years. 300 years after 632. You can do the math. The First Crusades didn't start until 1095, when the Catholic Church, Catholic Pope, Pope Urban, said, we're going to have a crusade to reopen Jerusalem so Christian and Jewish pilgrims could go back and pray. That was the reason for the First Crusade. That's historical fact. And that's what's being omitted when we're told that we are at fault for the rise of Islam. So we have a history of imperialism. It all started in 622 when Muhammad and his followers went to Medina from Mecca, and the verses turned violent, all the way up to 1683, when they were trying to conquer Europe. Who can tell me where they were beaten back in 1683? Anybody know?
September the 11th.
That's the date. Who beat them back? Where were they beaten back? Gates of Vienna. Gates of Vienna. And Rob already stole my thunder because the date that they were beaten back was September 11th, 1683. They remember. They remember the dates. Well, what did the Muslims do then? Well, they went back to the Middle East. And that's when Islam did change. It became cultural, secular. Europe was allowed to come in and colonize the Middle East. And they attempted to come into the 19th and 20th century. In fact, the caliphate, the last caliphate, was disbanded by a Muslim country, Turkey, in 1924, the Ottoman Empire. The last caliphate. Well, there were still some fundamentals around that dreamed of bringing back true Islam, and that gave birth in 1928 to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. And they started the third jihad, and that's what we're in now. This is a revival movement, folks, a revival movement to bring back Islam to this period here, when Sharia law dominated This is a revival movement. This is not a hijack movement. This is bringing Islam back to its true roots. True roots. So the deception goes on. The willful deception to keep us in the dark. You know who he is, James Clapper, in charge of our intelligence. He issued this document earlier this year in February to Congress and said Iran and Hezbollah are no longer threats to the United States. No longer threats to the United States. And I already told you about this deception by the FBI. When the FBI issued that document, 29 of the 30 most wanted terrorists on their watch list were Muslim. 29 and 30. Since 9/11, 80% of the Department of Justice prosecutions for terrorism have been linked to Islam. Islam. 80% linked to Islam. And yet the FBI said to us, Islam is no threat to the homeland. How about threats to police officers? Maybe we can get this a little closer to home. Sale Thompson went after 4 New York City police officers on October 25th of last year. Houston Taylor Clark attacked a Kansas City, Colorado officer with a knife on December 6th. And you probably remember this man, Ishmael Brinsley. He murdered 2 New York City police officers in Brooklyn just before Christmas. Many of us watched the funeral live on CNN and Fox. Unfortunately, both networks didn't tell us the truth about Brinsley. He was a convert to Islam. His middle name, Abdullah. Abdullah. And then there was this man. Hashim Abdul Rashid attacked police officers at Columbus, Ohio airport on January 8th of this year. And Noel Valencias indicted with another woman for attempted jihadi bombing attacks in New York City on April. And on April 25th, the Hennepin County Sheriff's Office in Minneapolis, St. Paul, officers were attempting to conduct an investigation of this man, Abubakar Shar Mahmoud, deliberately attempted to run the officers down. And then in Boston, Usama Rahim was killed by a joint terrorism task force because he, along with his partner, were going to behead Boston police officers. So what's the inspiration? Why were they trying to do all that? What was the motivation? ISIS. September 16th, ISIS went out with a fatwa, a religious ruling, kill police and military. Kill them. And they followed up on September 21st. If you are not able to find an improvised explosive device or you don't have any bullets, then single out the disbelieving American and smash their heads with a rock. Use anything to do it, a car. And they've been doing it, or attempting to. Ever since ISIS inspired them, motivated them to do it. Remember what the FBI director said, there may be thousands radicalized here. And then they also hacked into DOD's media. They now have the home addresses of over 100 military members, of their family members. And ISIS followers have been told to kill them. Kill families of our military members and kill families of police officers here in this country. Now, part of our problem is getting our hands around this because we have a Western mindset of what violence is. We are told that violence of this nature can only be a psychological problem. That the wires aren't crossed. The wires aren't crossed. Nobody rationally would do this. And religions or cultures don't cause people to be violent. After all, political correctness says what? All cultures are the same. All are good, all are bad, and are better than any others. Certainly all religions are peaceful. So that can only lead one possible cause. There must be sociological factors. Someone got a raw deal. Someone was raised in a bad family. Someone experienced racism or prejudice. Poverty. Poverty causes violence. That's what we believe. What do they believe? That violence is a rational choice. Violence is a rational choice. It is justified. The 109 violent verses of the Quran justify it. They find their inspiration there. And it's a means to achieve social justice. Once Sharia law is established, then there'll be peace. Social justice will be established. It's just getting there that's the problem. So watch how this plays out. The next time there's an attack, next time someone's killed, the very first thing someone tells us, the very first thing someone tells us in the media, or academics, or academicians, or politicians, it's not terrorism, and it's certainly not related to Islam. It's got to be something else. It's workplace violence. We've got to relabel it. Do you know to this date that the police have not, the FBI has not characterized either Garland, Texas, or Chattanooga as a terrorist attack? And then they ignore the perpetrator, especially if he's a convert. They tell us his Christian name. They never tell us what his new name is. And then they tell us, well, he must be mad. He must be mad. And if that doesn't work, he was acting alone. Well, they're told to act alone. They're not controlled. They are told to act alone. They're independent, lone actors carrying out jihad here. And then part of the propaganda is being paid for by the Islamic Center of North America, ICNA, a Muslim Brotherhood group, the Billboard campaign. The Billboard campaign. 2 in Atlanta, in Baltimore, Los Angeles, Miami, Philadelphia, Houston, Dallas, Sacramento, Chicago. Islam, just a religion of peace. Just to reinforce the message. The message. Ferguson. We've heard a lot about that, especially recently after their 1-year anniversary. ISIS was in Ferguson. Do you know that? ISIS supporters in Ferguson. I'm sorry that's too light for you to see. It says ISIS. And Palestinian supporters in Ferguson, stoking social unrest, attempting to equate what goes on in Ferguson to what goes on in Gaza. We understand your pain. We too have been subjugated to law enforcement actions, brutal actions, murder, unjustified by the Israeli authorities. So we feel your pain. And then ISIS publicized a letter. And I know you can't read that, but it basically says, if you pledge your allegiance to us, we will send our fighters there. In fact, they say, hey, blacks, ISIS will save you. And they've gone into other cities as well. And in Baltimore, this individual, Khalid Lulu Shabazz, the former president of the New Black Panther Party, notorious reputation as an anti-white, anti-Semitic, now has joined forces with drug gangs, rival drug gangs, and with ISIS. And we wonder why the murder rate, the crime rate has escalated so high. The last time we were told the truth, the 9/11 Commission told us what motivated the attackers And what's motivating the attackers is a seductive ideology rooted where? In Islamic law. In Islamic law. It's been laying dormant. It's now been revived. So what we face in the third jihad, well, we've been talking about the left. The overt violence by the foreign terrorist groups, the domestic lone wolves, the sleeper cells, all following a brand of Islam to take it back to its golden roots, its original roots. That's what Salafism is. Through attack. And while that's been going on, we've had the nonviolent attack, and that's what we'll talk about for the rest of the presentation. Mainstream front groups. The Islamization of our culture through disinformation and deceptiveness, financed by Saudi Arabia, under the banner of the Muslim Brotherhood, following the same brand to return Islam to its roots, to establish Sharia law through the indirect, quote, peaceful attack. The true Trojan horse in our midst. ISIS and sleeper cells, the homegrown terrorists, is not our only problem. Well, what is? This document uncovered by the FBI in 2004 clearly states what the Muslim Brotherhood is up to. The explanatory memorandum was written by the Muslim Brotherhood. The Ikhwan, the Brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is a grand jihad. Destroy Western civilization from within through sabotage. Sabotage its miserable house with their hands. What's he talking about? What are they talking about when they say that? Our hands. We're going to help them. I'm going to show you how in a minute. And by their own hands, the hands of their followers. And if you couldn't get the message from the first statement, maybe that will help. So that America is eliminated. And Sharia law, God's religion, is made victorious. That's what they're trying to do. And they told their own followers, if you don't understand this, you're not up to the task. Well, how are they going to do it? Well, they published this document, a 5-phase plan. The first 4 phases are peaceful. They may never even have to fire a shot. The FBI's had this document too, since 2004. So how are they going to do it? Through the Islamization or the change of our culture. Converting our space, our culture, into Muslim space. Slowly, drip by drip by drip, conditioning us to accept it. Mosque construction, there are now 2,200 mosques in this country. There are much more than houses of worship. 80% of the mosques in this country preach violence and distribute violent literature. Tell their followers to commit violence here. 80%. 80%. Dress codes. We're told that Muslim women to be obedient, must be covered. It's a religious practice. I submit to you that represents the subjugation of women. Do those women have any identity in public? No, they've lost it. It's been taken away from them. Foot baths. Muslims must pray 5 times a day. To do it properly, they must prepare their head, wash their head, face, hands, arms, and feet. Foot baths being installed in many of our public facilities at taxpayer expenses, college, university campuses. Public prayer, New York City, Friday afternoon, major intersection. Muslim men allowed to pray. Now, can you imagine if a Christian or Jewish group wanted to pray publicly like this? Do you think they would be given a permit? may be told to go to a park, or better yet, go to a church or synagogue. But they're allowed to do this by public officials who are doing nothing but appeasement. And in New Jersey, same thing. Public prayer, showing their political clout and power. And in those private rooms where we all know we can go to and just pray or meditate, and many of our airports and bus terminals and railroad stations are now being converted to Muslim-only prayer rooms. The National Cathedral changed to a mosque in Washington, D.C. And then if you go to Target and you try to check out with pork products or alcohol products, you may find this sign. Go to another cashier, because the one you're fixing to go to is a Muslim and she finds that objectionable. Oklahoma, the state capital, converted to a mosque. Folks, it's just a matter of time before we see the Islamic flag raised over our state capitals, maybe even the national capital. In New York City, 2 Muslim holidays recently added to the school calendar, all by elected officials. Maybe if we grant concessions, they'll love us. And City Hall, in Michigan, Taylor City Council unanimously approves a resolution condemning Islamophobia and prohibiting criticism of Islam. Ramadan this year occurred after Chattanooga attack, and the Empire State Building was celebrated, bathed in green.
In the White House.
And now in Orlando International Airport. Next time you go to Disney World, look it up. A $250,000 reflection room for Muslim prayers with state-of-the-art foot baths. So what does the liberal media continue to tell us? Well, maybe the covering for women aren't that bad after all. Maybe all women should wear it. And that's exactly what they encourage their followers to do. All women should wear covering. And department stores started to promote it. And on mannequins. And on Barbie. And Beyonce. And in these models going to the United Arab Emirates, just joking it up. Just joking it up. But what does the burqa really mean? Percy Ali, raised a Muslim in Somalia, is now here in this country, speaking out, trying to warn people about this threat. I think she pretty well describes what the burqa really means. It's gender apartheid. Gender apartheid. She's trying to go on college campuses to warn women, and she's being blackballed for it. It's self-censorship, because it's considered hate speech. First Amendment. So how about in our schoolrooms, our classrooms? In Texas, schoolgirls told to wear the burqa. Not Muslim schoolgirls, all girls. And in Michigan, not only schoolgirls here, but how about the teachers and faculty members? Same thing. Can you spell Common Core? And in Denver, parents were told contact their school board to resist a field trip to a local mosque, because if they go, their daughters would have to go covered. And in Massachusetts, when they took a field trip to a local mosque, the schoolgirls were taught how to pray. And not only how to pray, there's the instructor up there, but what to pray. The Shahada. I believe there's only one God, and Muhammad is his messenger. You say that 3 times in Arabic, you're in. you're in. And they're being taught that. This was reported on March 19th of this year. Students at Pine Ridge High School in New York told to recite the Pledge of Allegiance in Arabic, while the student body president announced one nation under Allah over the public address system. In a Union Grove High School in Wisconsin, 10th grade world history writing assignment, pretend you are a Muslim, either a Muslim, male or female, and give 3 examples of what you do daily for your religion. That's a writing assignment. And this Marine and his wife banned from Wapata High School in Maryland because they objected to the instruction their daughter was receiving on Islam. They dared question it. San Diego High School is now experimenting with halal food, full school lunches. And this was reported on June 11, 2015. 50 Pennsylvania school teachers participated in taxpayer-funded Islamic sensitivity training where they were taught how to pray in a mosque. Textbooks. The American Textbook Council has taken a look at history textbooks in particular and found the facts just don't jive. The facts just don't jive. 36 pages in one textbook is devoted to Islam, and a half page devoted to Christianity and Judaism. Many times I'll have faculty members in these presentations and they will speak up and say, that's exactly right. And I had a high school student in my county, in Cherokee County, come up to me after the presentation at my church, and he said, that's what we're being taught. Islam, just an alternative lifestyle. Just an alternative lifestyle. No mention of the conquest. No mention of the subjugation of women. No mention of female genital mutilation. None. No mention of the fact that a woman can be beaten by her husband if she's disobedient. And it's in the Quran. Just an alternative lifestyle. In many of the most popular textbooks are involved. And in Tennessee, posting the 5 pillars of Islam in public schools and taking down the 10 Commandments. And also in Tennessee, 3rd graders given this handout. 3rd graders given this handout. Pointing out the fact that some of our founding fathers had slaves. But how about the subjugation of women? How about the treatment of non-Muslim women as sex slaves today? How about the extermination of Christians that's going on today throughout the Middle East and Africa? No mention. But early this year in our State Department, this individual, Waleed Sharabi, visited our State Department as part of a Muslim Brotherhood delegation trying to persuade our government to put Morsi back in as the president of Egypt. What's he doing there? Is he waving to the cameras? No, he's not. That's the new Muslim Brotherhood salute. The 4-finger salute of the Muslim Brotherhood. And he's giving that in our State Department. And how about Congress? You know who Representative Nancy Pelosi is. She recently promoted or appointed a Muslim to the House Permanent Subcommittee on Intelligence. And he has well-documented ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, his campaign was financed by it. So what's the solution for all this? Well, let's see what our administration tells us. Islam is a religion of peace. Muslim terrorists don't adhere to true Islam. Rather, the extremists are considered just social activists with legitimate grievances caused by us, the West. It's our fault. And while Jordan and Egypt bomb in Yemen, our administration poses a jobs program for ISIS. We're told all they need is a job. And more recently, we're told we got to cure global warming. That's what's causing is ISIS. No truer statement? And yes. The movie now is censored on many of our colleges, campuses, and universities because it's considered offensive to Muslims. In Chattanooga, reported August 18th, petty drugs fired from Belk and banned from Northgate Mall because a customer overheard her say, Abdul Aziz was a piece of scum, and his family was too, for killing 4 Marines and 1 Navy sailor. So we got a problem. We got a problem with the unholy marriage between Islam and the progressives. Centralized control to achieve social justice, both of them. Same purpose. Both have common objectives. Destroy capitalism as we know it. And take away our freedoms. And that's what change has brought. That's what change has brought. Both share common prejudices. Anti-Christian, anti-Semitic. So while we admit Muslim refugees, we do not omit Christian refugees who are being exterminated right now in the Middle East. They cannot come into our country. And how about women? Subjugation of women. We know that under Islam, women are subjugated. How does the far left do that? There's only 2 things that the feminists want: reproductive rights and sexual freedom. Outside of that, they don't care anything about what's happening to women in this world and how they're being subjugated. When's the last time you heard one ever talk about the subjugation of women in Muslim countries? And how about this one? The advancement of moral degeneracy. We know what ISIS is up to. They're following the Quran. But how about us? What are the progressives up to? Can you count 57 million babies aborted? And how about the sale of body parts? And we shall see no shame to that. And our congressmen are still funding it. And then we got college campuses. Harvard professor Noah Feldman equates ISIS sex slavery with our period of slavery. This is what our students are being told. This justifies what ISIS is doing. And Boston University professor Qassi Ali blames U.S. for ISIS sex slavery in a recent Huffington Post article. The unholy marriage continues. They both use common methods, always attacking the speaker, always trying to silence free speech, always reviving history or only telling us a part of it. So, the next purge. Their aim to destroy American democracy for one world government. They call it the caliphate. The progressives call it the United Nations. Next purge, local law enforcement training. Do you know that law enforcement training at the federal level, FBI, Customs, ATF, has already been purged out of all message references to what I'm telling you tonight? Department of Defense, it's all been purged out. And now they're going to go after local law enforcement. If you take it at the city state, or county level, if they take federal funds, their training must be purged of any mention equating terrorism to Islam. So our willingness not to know is based on our obsession not to offend. And we are obsessed with it. We are left with this. What about freedom of religion? First Amendment. We're told that all religions are the same. All religions are the same. All promote peace. All promote some way of getting into an afterlife and to deal with the little demons we all have to face each and every day of our lives. No difference between any of them. Well, folks, I would submit to you there's a big difference. Because every one of those, I could show you justification in either the Quran or in Sharia law. Every one of those. And every one of those is a violation of U.S. law. And every one of those has been practiced here, in this country. And yes, we still have our counter-protesters. People who have still believed because they've been deceived. So what is protected under the First Amendment of Islam? Number one, they believe in one God. That's fine. That's a religious belief. Number two, they pray 5 times a day, before sunup and after sundown. 5 times. 24 times, 24/7. Charity. They give 2.5% of their total wealth to 8 different categories. One of which is a category to those fighters promoting Islam. That's a violation of U.S. law. They can't do that. But everything else, Ramadan. They want to fast from sunup to sundown 1 time a year for a month, that's fine. But remember what Ramadan represents. It's a military holiday, celebrating when Muhammad was a military leader. And then pilgrimage. They have to take a pilgrimage to Mecca 1 time in their life. So what are our elected officials telling us about all this? What are they telling us? Nothing. Nothing. The only one that I've heard mention it is Ted Cruz. Their silence is deafening at the federal, state, and local level. Well, some of you are probably skeptics. You say that a small group of dedicated people can't pull this off. It can't happen here. Well, it's happened before in our history, hasn't it? When the silent majority, if you remain silent, you are going to be irrelevant. Irrelevant. It's happened in Germany, in China, in Japan, in Russia, and yes, it's going to happen here. As I said, the majority of Muslims are peaceful, but they can be led too, just like we can, by a dedicated, committed group under the ban of the Muslim Brotherhood has tremendous influence. So steps you can take. Don't leave here mad. Do something about this problem. Number one, tell your federal elected officials to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. We could stamp this out in no time. If the Muslim Brotherhood here and all its entities was designated a terrorist organization. I asked Barry Loudermilk to do just that last Friday. He said he'd think about it. He'd think about it. Support this bill, H.R. 3314. 3314, proposed by Representative Brian Babbitt out of Texas, calling for a moratorium on all refugee resettlements here in this country. and resist those concessions that our local elected officials are making. It's nothing more than appeasement. The Islamization, the change of our culture. And next time someone comes here asking for your vote, ask them what they know about this. See what they say. Prevent attempts to curtail free speech. You may have disagreed with what Pamela Geller said while hosting that Drama Muhammad contest. But non-offensive free speech requires no protection. It's offensive speech that does. And when we bow to a foreign law prohibiting offensive speech, Article 6 of the Constitution is no longer prevailing. How many of your pastors and rabbis are talking about this? Look at that, 2 hands. I can't raise my hand either, because my pastor does not want to be confrontational. And man, our Georgia state legislators support no foreign law in Georgia. Right now, Sharia law has been used in 50 court cases in 23 states in our country. And family disputes. We've been trying for 4 years to get our Republican legislature to pass this legislation. They refuse to do it. When you get home, take a look at your world history textbooks that your children are using or your grandchildren. See how Islam is portrayed. And lastly, watch out for Chrislam, the blending of Christianity with Islam, Chrislam. And many of our pastors are trying to do that. It is called dialogue. Now, all of that I've given to Pat, and I think hopefully she's going to put it out on the website, all of those topics there. If you can't find an orange ribbon, wear it in solidarity with the Christians who are being slaughtered, being beheaded. And read that book, Catastrophic Failure by Stephen Coughlin. If you want to know about this information, about everything that I've said tonight, and a lot more that I haven't told you, that is a wonderful book, Catastrophic Failure. And yes, there are examples of local people with bumper stickers trying to fight back at their own expense. Honor Diaries is a DVD that's been put together by women who have been victimized by honor crime. And it's being silenced on our college campuses as being offensive to Muslims. The truth is being silenced. And then the American Infidels, the motorcycle gang, showing support or resistance to the Islamization of our culture. So when you leave here tonight, you can take out a pen and pencil. I'm going to tell you something you can do. But when you leave here tonight and you go out there in that nice night air, you're going to forget about this stuff, because all the deception and the media is not telling you the truth. Our elected officials don't know anything about this. So you have to practice due diligence. Take those sites down. These are wonderful sites to maintain information. Atlas Shrugs, Pamela Geller's site, puts out a lot of good information, factual information. The Florida Family Association, another good site, excellent. And Jihad Watch by Robert Spencer. If you want to be informed. Otherwise, when you leave here and wake up tomorrow, all of this will go away. Everybody get that? I'll put it back up and when we close. Closing thoughts. Yeah, it takes courage to know what to fear. Because if you're fearful, you've got to do something about it. You may choose to look the other way, but now you can never say you did not know. Ladies and gentlemen, it has indeed been my pleasure, honor to be here tonight. If you have any questions or comments, I'm here to answer those. Thank you very much for your attention.